Welcome to another episode of the Revenue Architects Podcast. This podcast is tailored for revenue leaders navigating the evolving landscape of sales, RevOps, and revenue management. In today's episode of Revenue Architects, we're talking to Joe Aurelia, a transformative RevOps leader who's helped enterprise teams rethink how revenue is managed, forecasted, and executed. Joe brings a rare blend of field experience and systems thinking, having led complex Salesforce implementations and align cross-functional teams through cultural and operational change. Whether it's forecasting accuracy, revenue systems design, or building real trust between RevOps and sales, Joe has consistently turned vision into repeatable revenue motion. His insights are a blueprint for any go-to-market leader serious about sustainable and predictable growth. Joe, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Steve and Jay. Really happy to be here.
Yeah, very excited to get started.
So give us a quick intro into your background and how you got into RevOps.
Yeah, absolutely. RevOps is one of those things where I think we kind of were doing it for a long time and didn't know it. And then we found out later, oh, we're doing RevOps, and I'll walk into that. But really start from a very strong technical beginning. So I'm officially a computer scientist by training. Started
Mhm.
out on the enterprise architecture side, working on large scale system design, orchestration, business intelligence, disaster recovery, really heavy metal type applications. Moved into more of the business and management side, starting different companies, growing and scaling those in different industries. And I popped into cybersecurity after that, which is where I am today, and growing and scaling that from being seed funded back in 2019 to now being a Series C and growing company in 2026. So on the revenue operations side, we're growing a previous company, and we really wanted to make a very simple mantra for how to grow the company. We said, look, we want to care about the customer, put the customer first, make sure they're happy, make sure they're satisfied. And we're very technical, so we just don't like doing things twice. We want to create repeatable process and we want to create things that can scale without an inordinate amount of headcount. And we landed on Salesforce back then. We architected the entire operations within that, everything from call centers, lead generation, funnel management, quoting, electrical analysis, engineering diagrams, partnerships, all of our marketing, everything end to end was all in the one system, which allowed us to really have a great visibility into the enterprise, and data in that industry was very important. And that allowed us to grow and scale pretty well without having to go through a lot of the pains. And to be honest, it wasn't until years after that corporation was completed that we actually looked back and said, oh, we built a revenue operations company, because that term didn't exist back then. We didn't have a name to call it. And hopefully we'll get into more of the marketing of RevOps in general as a branding thing, but it just didn't exist. We started from basic principles: care about the customer, do
Mhm.
things right, automate where you can, and use technology where needed, and use a human element where technology is not available. And now, as we walk into this day and age, obviously there's just a tremendous amount of fanfare around RevOps, right? There's a lot more definition, a lot more understanding of the impact that can be made, but there's still a lot of special sauce in terms of how we marry the actual definition with the people, with the leadership, with the change management, with the cultural differences. And I'm happy to go into all of that today with you both.
Perfect. Okay. A lot of solid experience you got, Joe. I think we'll be
Mhm.
excited to get started. And let me put my thoughts together. So when we last time spoke, right, one thing that really stood out was how much RevOps success really depends upon the mindset alignment, right? Not just tooling. And you mentioned it can take up to 90 days to reinforce, right? Just to shift the beliefs and behaviors across their org. So my question is, what does it really take to get this full buy-in for a RevOps strategy?
Yeah, I think you have to look at it in two ways. And if we're talking about a company that already exists, right? So they're doing something today, they have sales motions, they have the GTM, and you decide we're going to create a revenue operations team. We're going to either rebrand an existing one or create one from scratch. It's not like a panacea. It's not like you just buy it and magically you are successful, right?
Yeah.
It's not like you're upgrading from a flip phone to an iPhone and you just magically can do what you need. You really need to understand how are you going to integrate the new mandate of this team into the entity, right? You're not coming in like a bull and trying to mess everything up and just create all this process and calculation. You're really there to solve challenging problems that no one wants to take ownership of. And I want to be careful with how I say that, right? We're not saying that people don't care, people looking the other way, but there's a lot of things in the company that don't have a home. If you look at operations in general, we are the team that does the things that don't have a home. We're like the kitchen sink because someone needs to kind of take care of the stuff. So when you look at it from a revenue operations point of view, the way I like to consider it is that anything that impacts, disrupts, or is tangentially connected to the revenue conversation can be an element that the RevOps team can go attack and solve. So things where, sales sees the issue, but it's not necessarily affecting them every single day, or they have a lot of other things to do, marketing, CS, finance. They all see these things, but it's very hard for them to raise their hand and say, look, I'm going to fix it, because it's part of their problem, but not really
Mhm.
germane to the exact mandate that they have. Whereas revenue operations will come in and say, look, we're not holding the commission bag. We're not holding the responsibility for marketing. We're not doing campaign management here or funnel. Our job is to solve stuff. Our job is to make sure that revenue is not stuck. Our job is to make sure that we are
Mm.
fixing things that are blocking. We're almost like the dental floss of the dental hygiene, almost, right? We're there to get everything out and fix things. So with that mandate, you can go in and understand, look, we're having some problem here in reporting. It's working, but it's not working. Or there's some issue with product and the communication with
Mhm.
enablement and getting out to the client. The client's always coming back in contracts and asking this question, why? Where did that belong? That's not a question they generated at deal time. It's a question they generated across the revenue conversation, right? So going back and saying, okay, what are we delivering to them in the beginning? Maybe that BDR message is wrong. Maybe the campaign message is not right. Maybe they're receiving the wrong asset, or are they receiving an updated marketing pitch? Asking those questions in a manner that is not just, hey, this is wrong, but let's understand why we're having this conversation. We're having this conversation because something isn't working right. We're not blaming. We're saying something's not
Not
functioning
working.
right. We're losing revenue. We're diminishing customer trust. And what do we need to take to solve that? So you put the emotions on the side, you put the
Mm.
people blame on the side, you put the history to the side, and you say, what is required to get to this goal? And then
Exactly.
having the ability to go to those teams and have those conversations without handcuffs, I think really makes a difference. So when we say 90 days or 120 or wherever it is based on the size of your company, it's about showing the business that you can make a change, that you can work as a partner, that you're there to assist, and creating those small wins early on to look at your team and say, look, we're seeing impact here. We're not just seeing another process layer, right? This isn't another black hole or a contract being signed. We now have support. Resources are here to make my life easier and to make things better.
So a couple of things, right? Very important points. One, you said RevOps is typically facilitating the reaction, right? Not participating into it, really, right? Marketing somebody's doing, sales operations somebody's doing, right? But you're making sure that the entire orchestration of revenue is happening. You gave a very nice analogy of a dental floss, saying that we are the floss who will make sure that you chew properly and you digest properly. But we are not putting the food in mouth. We are not chewing it. We're not responsible for digestion. So it's very beautifully put.
So I want to move into, once you get some sort of strategic alignment with that, forecasting usually is one of the most formal things of RevOps, right? It's one of the most challenging issues in sales ops. So when you get it in place, it seems like forecasting becomes a little bit less about guesswork and more about behavior-driven data. So when we think about like prep rituals to pipeline hygiene, syncing with finance, how does the foundation of alignment change the way you begin to forecast revenue once you gained it?
I think it's a messy situation, right? There's usually a lot of blood in the water when you're having that conversation, and people have their histories of what they like and they don't like. There's something I learned earlier on where, again, this may get you into trouble, but the more attractive a report looks, the more likely I'm going to disbelieve its actual validity. Because if you spend too much time making it look pretty, I got to wonder about what is the data inside. That's some almost like a Salesforce classic versus lightning concept, right? One may look more colorful, but the data might be a little bit more skewed. So having those really hard conversations, like, great, you're showing me this report, we're looking at this, we've been looking at it for a while, but clearly we're having a conversation because something isn't attuned to what leadership wants. Where's the data coming from? The data is the integral part of everything in a GTM
Mm.
system. Without the clean data, without the hygiene, without the ritualistic understanding of the mapping of data between the consumption from one system and the modification by another system, all those reports are essentially meaningless. So we have to sit down and say, look, we're not going to have the answer today. This might take a little bit of time, but the question is, do you want the right data? Do you want the reports that can actually drive intelligence in your business and make decisions from that data? And to do so, we have to go back. So is this coming in from certain lead sources, coming in through your HubSpot or your outreach campaigns? How it's being mapped to Salesforce? Is it being matured in some way? Are there any regional differences? Is Meta doing it differently than the UK or than the US? How are we putting all this in together? I think when we have that understanding, and that comes from two ways, either one after the fact or the other, if you're lucky enough to do it from scratch, it has to be the foundational pattern by which you look at all of the matriculation of data throughout the life cycle of your GTM systems. So understanding intimately, this is what I'm getting, this is what it means. We don't have multiple flavors of what it means, right? You see some products where they still have two fields. One is first name, one is F name, and they tell you to guess which one is first name. Like there's only one field. I shouldn't have to be guessing F underscore name and L underscore name. It has to be very clear. So I think almost telling your Salesforce team or whatever CRM you're using, like you're standing in front of your systems with a bat, a nice, clean, professional bat, but good data in, bad data out. Just because the CEO said to add this field to Salesforce doesn't mean you have to just say yes. You have to have a conversation. You're not being argumentative, you're not being negative, but the question is, what do you want from it and what will the effect have? That immediate gratification of the report doesn't necessarily mean it's great for the business. Back to your question, I think looking at the long-term impact of the data changes for reporting, for forecasting, and being able to ask questions, going back to not holding the commission part there, looking at a report and say, how do we even get to this point, right? Are we going all the way back to the initial ad that was out there on the screen, or the BDR conversation, or the script, or some AI generated content that maybe was misaligned? You have to be able to ask those really hard questions. I think not having the mandate of you are marketing or you are sales, you have a little more leniency to say I'm fixing a problem without going back to a singular silo.
All right, I want to ask this little caveat question. Of the organizations that you've come into and you've met with the first VP of sales, what was the average accuracy of their sales forecasts? At the start, like when they're like, what was it? So I'm asking like, what was acceptable to the organization on the sales side to be able to be like, oh yeah, we're only 60% confident in our forecast.
That's, I think, a lot of meetings you go into, right? And maybe you comment here too. You're looking at a report and the numbers are not correct. And you go into a conversation about how you got there or what to fix. No one ever goes back and says the numbers are low. You just kind of continue with the conversation. So it's almost like you can have numbers that are not great and that needs to be rectified, but there's always some human conversation that's actually adding the true color behind it. I think the goal is to always look at it and say, no matter, even if you're perfect, reports can change, numbers can be wrong, numbers can be altered. You have to just be striving towards what result we want to have. What are we getting towards? Because if you got a report and it said you were perfect, do you just believe it? Or do you just assume that if you're fully report driven that everything is fine? Or do you look at it and say, do the other things line up? Do the other supporting frameworks and evidence align with that story? A singular report can't tell you that you are absolutely great. Go back to Aruba and chill on the beach or something.
This is why I was thinking like even great temperature check of your cultural change when you start to see what's accepted, right? Both by organizations. So if the leadership's accepting the VP of sales saying we're 50% confident in our forecast, that says a lot, right? If it says if we're like 90% confident, then that also says a lot. And so I wanted to throw that at you because I was like, I think it's funny as you sit there, you'll see it like, whoa, these guys are really comfortable with a large margin of error, and these guys are not. And how do I bring those into better alignment together?
I think also if you're entering a new organization, either as an employer or as an advisor, and you're having that first conversation, numbers aside, what is the interaction between the players on the call? How are they conversing about the numbers? What is the participation level? Which way are the eyes going? Because that can tell more than the data.
Absolutely.
Is it one person presenting numbers and everyone's just nodding and saying yes? That's not a good sign. Are we having some lively feedback? There's a lot of body language that has to be read into understanding what's the sniff test on this thing.
Oh yeah, and I think this is a side topic, but that's how we get our gut feeling, right? When we're observing a conversation, at the gut we feel, oh, this is not going right. Even though all data, everything looks very nice because people are not interacting correctly. There is no eye contact, right? People are stepping back when you ask a question, right? These things actually our brain picks up very nicely. But I wanted to ask you this, that we have seen a lot of friction, right, between RevOps team, sales, and the priority don't really align. So my question is, from your experience, how can RevOps get laser focused on what sales actually values, like quota attainment, faster life cycle, higher win rates, and build that real credibility at the field level?
Yeah, the best answer I know is not realistic, but I think if the RevOps leaders have had the opportunity to be in the sales shoes and be in the marketing shoes in the past, that's really great. So personally, I've done door-to-door sales, I've done million-dollar sales, I've done the mix. My definition of sales has changed from when I was younger to where I am today. I think that maturity of understanding what it's like to be in their shoes is really valuable. Because at the end of the day, their job is to go out, sell, get closed, move forward, reduce churn, right? It's a very simple mandate. Whether the process is super efficient or every I is dotted and T crossed, while they may want, that is technically not their job. So understanding that, I think, is very key. So I think forming first a very close relationship with sales is necessary to be able to have the open communication, where I think things like deal velocity, closing time can be ameliorated to be faster for them is by looking at that conversation, saying, okay, what are we doing here? Are we too slow on contracts? Are we too aggressive on red lines? Are we not providing a seamless handoff between the conversation you're having and what appears in the paper? We've all seen these days, especially on the enterprise side, you might be telling the client that you are selling them the pink widget. And then for some reason on the paper, you say it's actually the pastel pink widget and they freak out. But you need to have that consistency of what's actually happening there, and identifying those things with an operator's lens, being a little bit more specific, could save them time. What is the value to a salesperson of 2 less email exchanges, which takes another week to go back and forth, right? That's money on the table. That could be a lost quarter. That could be a lost deal. That could be a time for a competitor to come in, or even internally, maybe they lost financing. Maybe one leader decided to change their mind. So every single second that you delay anything related to a client is negative to sales. So the bar, I think, for positivity from RevOps relationship is almost pretty low, because the minute that you can actually save them time in that client conversation, you've essentially got them a higher percentage to closing that deal. And if you do that consistently, you can only compound the benefit that you're providing.
Awesome. I think as you've worked in larger enterprises, so you've gotten a sense of what a complete revenue management strategy can look like. But also working in these smaller organizations, you're starting to see how you're building one. They don't start with one generally. You sell what you can, and then you grow into problems that you've developed because you didn't plan, right? So when you're building in broader revenue cloud strategies, because it's got to show up in the technology to align to the actions, right? What do you feel is really driving a transition to smaller companies picking up revenue management earlier? And how does that impact key levers like deal velocity, approval, and margin control, which usually isn't a problem until you get past growth. But as they're getting closer, it's happening faster.
Yeah, I actually really love that question, because it's like living in 2 different worlds. So you have the enterprise side, which means you've been there for 10, 20 years plus, and you have all this history. History is messy, right? Maybe you have mid companies been there for 6 or 10 years and they still have history. And they have these brand new companies that are very clean. When you're very clean, you can start with all these wonderful new tools because you have no history. There's no migration, there's no data concern. You can follow their out of the box process, scale it to a certain amount, and then figure out, okay, maybe it's time to move to something more serious. What I think is available is that being the new technology has taken a line and saying, okay, this is the normal path that you go from point A to point B, right? From doing the marketing and kind of getting someone in the door to actually closing and continuing the revenue conversation. You're basically giving them a pattern to follow. And patterns what we follow everywhere, right? Everywhere from software design to business development to sales strategies. So isn't it safer for an entity of any size to be following a pattern for the revenue management as opposed to not? It's just that younger companies have the ability to walk into these tools without the pains of the path and not migrating old data. I think for more mature companies, it becomes a bit of a challenge. How can you jettison what you're using? How can you merge them together? How do you change your processes? And are you going to bring in one tool but then kick out 5 others? Because some of these revenue management systems take the full thing from end to end, right? And you're doing a complete rip and replace. Can you afford it? Is your team skilled enough? So there's lots of fun technical questions, which goes back into RevOps, but also technology strategy, integration, migration, really serious type things.
Excellent.
I was thinking, and I wanted to go back to what you said. You already said that, but see, there is one thing that I have seen confuses a lot of organizations about the ownership. That where does RevOps start and where does sales ops and deal desk begins? You said it in a nicer way, but I wanted to drill down a little more into it and ask you, so what do you think about dividing these responsibilities, number one, and driving true collaboration? But the big question is, who truly owns revenue execution?
It's a great question. It's a complicated question. I know if you go online and you search for like a RevOps org chart, you'll receive like 20 different versions, and it's absolutely, it's very interesting to watch. I think in my experience, having all those elements underneath a RevOps leader does make it easier. So if you took deal desk, Salesforce ops, CRM ops, marketing ops, even some of those legal and contracts and put them underneath that umbrella, I think you have a bit of a faster ability to run and make changes because all the players are there, you're all working on the same thing. And in some companies, it doesn't even have to be true management hierarchy. It even could be just a well understood dotted line of responsibility. So it's not like it has to be written in stone per se. But I think with the ownership, really, the ownership of the revenue execution begins with the CEO. They have to set the stage for what's going to go forward. If a team is looking at the leaders of the company and they are not concerned about the numbers, the metrics, quality reporting, good customer outlook. How is a team to follow? We all need to follow our leaders. So this company is caring about the revenue execution, caring about how clean we are to a client, how we are improving quarter over quarter, how we are maturing in our conversations. So we can all take that cue and say, look, this is the expectation set for us, right? It's not just my manager or my manager's manager. The company wants us to go forward. And once that cue is set, once that North Star is in place, then the ownership becomes everybody's responsibility. It's the C-level's responsibility. It's the leadership's responsibility. It's the individual contributor's responsibility because they all know this is the accepted practice. It is what we're supposed to do. Even like regular things in life. When you go to a restaurant, you use a fork and a knife. It's accepted practice. It's the same thing. You have to be trained that this is what we're doing and this is what's important to this particular company.
All right, go ahead, Jay. You have another question?
Now, I just wanted to ask, because as a RevOps, when you're working with different teams and enabling them, where do you stop and where do you want them to really take on and be responsible?
Yeah, the stopping part is interesting. And I kind of go back to something we were chatting on in our earlier call is having a strong support system for revenue operations. Depending on the seniority of the players in the team and depending on their status within the company, you sometimes need a pretty decently loud voice to hold the shield and push forward, especially in the earlier days, right? To be able to make it clear that revenue operations needs to be involved in certain conversations that are not normally there. So we're talking about maybe potentially product conversations, entitlement conversations, product marketing conversations, contractual conversations, things where they wouldn't normally consider to bring in that part of the ops team, right? So I think having that individual or individuals to carry forward the mantra of the team is really key. It's a hard thing. I think they stop where the problems end. There's really not direct gated garden. I think that certain companies or certain leadership might put a garden in saying, hey, look, like we know this is a problem, but you stop here. Your playground is over. Your sandbox is done. But I think that's going to depend on the company, depending on the culture, depending on maybe international reasons of how things are set up. But I think as long as the conversation is germane to something in the revenue cycle, in the revenue architecture, in that conversation, I think it's fair game. And then having that strong leader to essentially put that support forward as for why that involvement is necessary or why something needs to be delayed or worked on or a project needs to be initiated, that's where you get the marrying together. So less so for me is about, hey, this is taboo, we can't go here. It's more about what business case are you making? How are you selling that story? And how are you making it clear enough that people see, look, if I don't do this, bad things happen. That train and those train tracks become way too far apart. How to bring it back together? We need to get this team in place to actually execute these changes.
Perfect. Okay.
I actually want to hit on that because there's something you and I talked about, Joe, that I really feel is important that I think you've just created a gem out of is you did something about the way you branded all of the people that help you in RevOps and how that impacted the organization's perspective on how they viewed you, listened to you, worked with your team. So can you talk through how you did that and the importance of the brand of RevOps in general so that you can build the kind of cohesion around everybody giving your team the chance to facilitate and help?
Yeah, I've owned many teams in this particular company. A subset of those teams were all what we consider RevOps today. So you had your marketing ops, your deal desk, your Salesforce ops, contracts. As let's say the external popularity of revenue operations started to accelerate over the last few years, it became clear that this was something that was becoming well known. Being involved with lots of communities, reading lots of white papers and podcasts and presentations like this, it became clear that there was something here more than just a renaming. There was some value behind it. So I did some thinking. I partnered with our head of finance. We worked together to understand what are we going to do to make this happen. We're seeing acceleration in the business. We're seeing diversification in markets and additional regions. There's more complexity coming up, more challenges as you grow and you get older and more people are joining. And we mutually agreed that this would be a good path forward to have that rebranding, to re-architect sort of the team and the mantra. And before the business case, we worked through it. We got that executed. And where you see the real like hand-to-hand combat kind of changes that people would look at the team before and say, okay, Nancy does this because she's a Salesforce admin and Roger does this because he's working on this closeout process. And now this is related to Salesforce in general or just revenue or just a client conversation or just something went wrong. Let's pull in RevOps. I also think I'm a big alias person from like a email group kind of point of view. So we're not talking about the individual members in the team. You're always talking about the group, right? RevOps at your company, legal at your company, trying to get that kind of cadence in their memory that you're dealing with a team, which also means I'm reducing fallouts in my team, right? As people leave on vacation, change, you have this kind of hive mind of information that's there for the life of the company. You have a team, you branded them, you presented them in a certain way, they're making those small wins and being successful. But then also when people communicate with them, they're communicating with not just one person, but a team. So everything is larger, everything is more direct and more official. I think that helps.
Nice. Yeah, I like that idea that I don't want you to have to think that I'm the only one who's going to answer your question. Second,
Yeah.
because it creates kind of a codependence, like Joe's the only one who's going to answer this. And you're like, no, we have a team for that. And there's an element as a leader where you could answer it, but you want Nancy to answer it, or Jim or whatever. And like, no, I need you to get back. I need you to play point because ultimately I need them thinking as much as I do because we're a group. And the same side of that is the other teams interacting with your team start to see them as a group and say, let me just throw this up because Nancy might actually have an idea that came out of nowhere from past experience that we didn't know about. And he would
Exactly.
never have found out. Yeah.
Exactly. If you think about it too, we're not recreating the wheel, right? We treat these
Mm.
things as if they're new entities. Think about the ticketing system for your IT group, right? IT is nothing new. Do you specifically message your one IT guy or do you put in a ticket? I have a laptop issue,
Correct.
a software request. It's a group thing. So I think letting people realize that we're also trying to be efficient here and use things that work, practices and methodologies that we've already are tried and true. In addition, think about the reduction in conversation in certain meetings, right? Or the missed interconnection points between projects that might be dropped because they didn't
Yeah.
know that information. So yes, people are reading lots of emails. You obviously hope they can read emails very quickly and process that information, see if it's important, but they all understand the lay of the land and the interconnected pieces in a complex matrix organization that might otherwise be dropped. So it really goes deeper than just one thing. There's many ancillary benefits, in my opinion.
And
Yeah.
I think this emailing it to a group and gathering that information is also very instrumental for you to run AI on top of it, do summarization so it's quicker for anybody to understand what's going on here. At the same time, figure out what are the improvement points, where are the frictions, what's working, what's not working, right? Because instead of collecting emails from 10 people and then trying to do it versus you have one box or one group where everything is coming, all interactions are being captured there, I think becomes priceless.
It does, especially for us where I am today. We work on very large enterprise deals, right? So very complex,
Mm.
large deal cycles. So the ability for us, especially at the management level, to enter a query into our system and look at the entire conversation can be the difference between something taking a week to get back to a client or getting back to them in the next hour. It just makes information faster, and it's the information that drives those faster close ratios, which allows us to keep sales on our good side.
And
Excellent.
I wanted to ask you something which you spoke last time, but to give you a context, I come from a very hardcore technical background. I used to be a C+ programmer and went into account management and finally went into sales. And that made me realize, oh my God, this is the hardest job on the planet. And importantly, when I started using the CRM, I struggled using it. I said, being a technical guy, I can't figure where to navigate and what to input and what to do. How the heck the sales guys are going to do it? So you mentioned last time that you highly automated Salesforce, right? Almost wrote 70,000 lines of Apex code. So my question is, can you walk us through how forward-thinking teams are really designing, centralizing these scalable revenue systems using Salesforce, and what are the adjacent tools which, in your opinion, have worked and have not worked?
Yeah, I think the critical element from a sales point was understanding visibility versus necessity to change. So when
Okay.
you're looking at every screen that they're presented to in their workflow, what do they need to see versus what do they need to change? And ensuring that you're handling that not only from a security aspect, but from a day-to-day physical aspect. So when they look at the screen as any salesperson and they go to edit it, what is the mental load and taxation of seeing 50 potential edits versus 10? It's
Mm.
significantly different. So if I'm only seeing a limited set of things I may need to look at, I am be more inclined as a salesperson to actually pay attention and to enter the data. Whereas if I see 50, I'm more inclined to say, just show me the red ones. I want to go away and do something else. So you really have to think about how they would be receiving the tooling. Even though it might be safe for them to see or edit those things, is it really necessary? So what do you
Mm.
need to do in their job to make sense? Also thinking about the actual life cycle of all of the changes as they go through things, not just to sit there and let's as a RevOps team handle all of these projects and complete them, but let's walk through that case. What does it look like to come home from an event and work on a campaign and push that through? What does it look like to create a quote? What does it look like to accelerate the progress of an opportunity? Is it arduous? Is it clean? Does it gather the data I need? Does it have all the details for all the stakeholders? So not just to do something, but to put yourself in their shoes and see if it makes sense prior to saying, hey, this is golden. We're not going to change it for a while.
Excellent. You've also worked both in enterprise, but you've also gone through growing companies. I know often a lot of times that involves acquisitions or mergers. and things like that, or raising capital. And I want to ask you about that as a banker, former banker myself, that how does the data quality in the Salesforce platform impact that availability of funding for an organization as it grows? So talk to a little bit about what you've seen in ways that can both inhibit or enhance.
Yeah, I think that question is very underrated in how important it is. And I've never had many people even ask that question. So I hope people pay attention to this one. When you're going through any kind of event like that, whether it is funding, acquisition, exit, due diligence, whatever it happens to be, there's always a tremendous amount of questions that are asked, right? They're asked in a very direct manner, usually by a law firm. They want answers back very quickly because they want to prove that you actually have the data, not that you had to make it up from scratch. The ability to harvest that information from your CRM systems, from your GTM systems, and trust it is literally the first step in the process. Because once you get that data, finance needs to look at it. Waterfalls need to be created. Spreadsheets need to be matriculated. Views need to be sliced and diced as per the requirements of that particular diligence request. All that work cannot be done if there's no clean data, right? So being able to trust your data and export it in a way to answer those questions is integral to the success of those particular activities from a financial point of view. On the other side as well, I love to talk about the contract side. I've been doing contracts and legal as well for way too many years, I guess, at this point. A lot of companies look at contracts and sign them. We have a signature, they put it away, we're done. That's not the story. The metadata around an agreement is ultimately the key to success. So
Yes.
understanding how many partner agreements, when, why, where, what region, expiration date, terms, renewal, insurance, liability, indemnity, any kind of crazy conditions, being able to
Right.
extract that just like your CRM and pull reports from it is also very key to answering those questions. To be able to answer the question of how many clients do you have that have super caps or limits that are outside the bounds of your insurance, so that you have special termination for convenience clauses. Imagine not having that data in a receivable fashion and then going back and looking at 3,000 PDF files quickly. How would you do that? Yes, you could say throw AI at it. It's not going to be a 100% accurate answer. So all that data quality issue and that
Yeah.
foresight, I think, are really important.
3,000 PDF sounds like a nightmare.
And
Yeah.
we do a lot of these Salesforce optimization work, and you would relate to that because you're one of those who have really made your hands dirty with Salesforce. A lot of people come in, try to help or get frustrated and say, let's go back to Excel. Consolidate the report and send me monthly, and they don't log in, right? A lot of such leaders we have seen. My question really is to you that for a company, how do they really think about? Because a lot of companies are in a Salesforce mess. As data is not good, processes are not optimized, adoption is not there, right? Security posture is not there. These are very common problems we see. And now they want to put AI on top of it, right? And as if you do that, and we were yesterday actually talking through it, and we recorded a very funny video about it, saying that if you do that, like humans really exercise judgment and stay in a lane, right? But AI only looks at permissions and access to data. And if it has access to data, it feels that I'm allowed to use it. And if you have an overprivileged system, for example, it's really going to say something which you don't want it to say, or bring up some data like somebody's sales compensation. It might give as an example saying that this is how you should do within the right intent, but wrong data it has used, right? So my question to you is, most of these companies who are in your experience, how should they really attack this problem? What should they do first, second, third?
It's challenging because there's different camps on the AI side, right? I think we all agree that there's benefits to the judicious implementation of it where appropriate to create impact in a company. I think using it just to use it is a fallacy that can get people into trouble. So it's not like we're saying no, but we're saying what is the expectation here, right? If I put a tremendous amount of automation on top of low quality data and processes that your own team can't define, how do you expect the AI to define that for you? The AI is going to automate and answer questions based on what you've presented to it. If you yourself don't even know what your process is, what do you think is going to happen? So it's a little upsetting, especially I'm sure on your side. You have to basically tell people, look, I want to help you, but I can't do what you're asking. I need to do all these other things first that are expensive and timely and require human resources before I can actually get to your actual ask. But if you want it done right, we have to kind of start at a different level. And that's a bit of the challenge. So ensuring that, hey, am I looking at the right data? Going back to data quality and cleanliness. Do I have the right processes? Is this the way I want to mature things? That's a really hard part, right? Getting that in place before you start to automate over it. I also like to point out that even before AI, there's a tremendous amount of automations that we have, right? flows, previously
Those
process
are
builder, Apex, integrations. We've been automating for a very long time. It's not like we're not automating. We just have a different tool in our toolbox to do a different type of automation. So we're just adding on automation. It's not like we're just coming into it for the first light. On the security side, that's a very special topic. So obviously, Salesforce security is very important. It's also a very arduous activity, right? You have to be very resilient, very attentive to the rules. I think nowadays that's even more critical, even outside of the AI part, simply because of the amount of integrations we have in the system. Obviously, looking at other recent events over last year and before that, the ability for mistakes to happen, for systems to go awry, for bad actors to be in place, it's really important for everyone to be well defined, whether it's a human in your system, whether it's an integration. So people can only see and touch what they need to see and touch. And if you have that level of consistency, which is very hard to do, at least you're in a better position when you add on other tools. And when you add on AI to it, again, what does AI need to see? Should it be a unique profile permission set? Should we tie it down? Should
correct,
we give it a
correct.
rules that don't go to these areas? I think that's very key. But as you both know, even just out of the gate, you add a new package into Salesforce. Objects and fields get assigned to everybody. Like everyone gets access. So you have to almost have a religious nature to say when you do all these things, you scrape them out, you block them out, right? And you have to build that mentality of security and compliance in your team from the beginning. It's not just an AI thing. It's every piece of data, every new field, every new package. Does it pass these tests? Do you understand what's happening? Are you looking at your drift management within the CRM, so to speak?
Okay.
So if I hear you right, you need a revenue management strategy to make sure that you have all of these people, processes, and data in the right structure before you throw on an AI strategy that the CEO thinks is a good idea.
In a short version, yes, but I think in
Yeah,
order to make that conversation successful, you need to first have built the trust that the
yeah,
team has the best interest of the company in mind,
sure.
and that it's going to be successful there. So it's not a no, it's
Mhm.
a this is how we get there successfully. You have to remove, especially with the AI part and other type of leadership conversations, you have to remove the emotion from it and talk more from the data point of view, from the physicality of what is
Sure.
going to occur. Just saying your data is messy and ugly, no one likes that. You have to be able to show it in a different way.
Sure, understood. Okay, Joe, is there any other advice you might have for RevOps leaders as they're going through and navigating the new future of RevOps and revenue management?
I think it's a really cool time. I think we've gotten past the point of view of defining RevOps, right? I think we're now into the execution phase and in the maturity phase. I see the roles and responsibility and the scope increasing over time as people realize the impact that can be made. I see a lot more technicality coming into it as we talk about the AI intervention in these applications, more GTM systems, more speed to market. I do think we probably need to talk more as an industry about the leadership aspect of revenue operations, about the, as you mentioned, the revenue management layer that goes on top of that team to ensure that they are successful. They're not just helping others, they themselves need to have a management strategy of how they're actually doing their own work. Listening to podcasts like this, joining conferences, having communities, having conversations, just like we don't want our data to be in silos. As humans, as revenue operators, we shouldn't be in silos either.
Excellent.
We really started this Revenue Architect podcast, especially for this reason, to really create this peer-to-peer community. It helps us, right? How do we position our services to people like you? It definitely helps us how you think, what's going on. But largely what we have realized is it has become a very good community of people interacting with each other, sharing ideas and doing things like that. And we are learning and sharing it so much that you're absolutely right. It's a space which is maturing, right? Definition is gone. Now everybody's saying, oh, this has to be done. How do we do it and how do we mature it? Very well. So great advice. Thank you for your time. I think we really loved having the conversation.
Yeah, Joe, we really appreciate you coming on and sharing your wisdom. I can't wait to share it with the world. So thank you so much.
Thank you both for having me. It was great.
Thank
All
you.
right, everyone, thank you for tuning in and keep up for our future episodes. And please like and subscribe. We'd love to get your feedback. We'd love to share our stories of our great revenue architects. And we'll see you next time.